10 tips to ride a motorbike like a pro. Tip number 1 is your body position. And the first thing you need to think about is what you're doing on the straight. So that involves getting tucked in. To get tucked in, you slide yourself to the back of the motorcycle, you put your chin down towards the tank. Some riders have it touching on the tank, some riders have it just hovering above. That gets your head under the screen. You then pull your wrists back like this and your elbows in, so your elbow is in, touching the tank, pressed against your knee. And then as you've put your chin down, that's going to pull this shoulder down as well. You can imagine trying to put your wrist like this so your palms are facing forwards and you can see the back of your hand. The more you have your arm up like this, the higher up your elbow is going to be. So the further you can get it round, the easier. One thing you're going to have to think about with when you're pulling your hand back like this is your throttle position. If you start with your hand right around here, you can get your arm a lot further back round this way. The further you start with your arm like this, you're going to struggle to get your arm round and down. So think about your hand position as you're coming onto the straight. Step number 2, body position, is braking. So as you've got to the end of the straight, you're tucked in like this. The first thing you want to do as you reach the end of the straight is sit yourself up. That will put yourself into the wind. And as I sit up, I also straighten my arms out and sit myself slightly further back in the seat. Each rider will be different depending on how tall you are, but I tend to sit further back. That gets weight over the back of the bike and stops the bike trying to come up onto the front wheel. Unless, of course, your top rack Razgat the old glue. The next section of body position is mid-corner. So you've been sat up on the straight like this, you're braking. The important thing to do is try and think about your mid-corner position before you actually get there. A lot of riders tend to get into the middle of the corner, they jump off the bike and that upsets it right in the middle of the corner when you don't want it to. So as you've braked, if you're going to go to a left-hand corner, you will slide your bum off to the inside on the left. If you're going to go right, you slide to the opposite side. And I slide myself in that position whilst I'm still bolt upright on the brakes. The reason you do that is as you then fall into the corner, you're already in position and it unsettles the bike a lot less. Things to think about as you're in the middle of the corner is bending your inside elbow. I see a lot of riders, as they learn to slide their bum off the seat, it then panics them. And because they panic, they straighten their inside arm, which puts them back into the middle of the bike. You look like Mick Doohan from the 80s, but bikes have a lot more grip and a lot more traction now, and you don't need to sit in the middle of the bike. So let your inside arm relax, let your shoulder relax, and that will pull yourself down to the inside. Imagine touching your head off the wing mirror. The more you can do that, the more it will pull your body to the inside of the bike. The last thing on your body position is where you put your feet. Now, I always try to ride on the balls of my feet. The further your foot's forward like this, the less control you've got. So think about being like a boxer. A boxer's always on their feet. Footballers, most sports, you're kind of on your toes. You're a lot lighter like that. You can move about, you're more agile, and that's something to think about. So in the middle of the corner, on my inside foot, I have that up and out the way. The more that toe's sticking out, the more likely it is to start scraping off the floor. So if you find yourself scraping your toes a lot of the time and you're not getting your knee down or you're not leaning over a lot, it's probably because your inside foot is too far forwards and sticking out. So try and pull that back up and out the way. Your outside foot doesn't matter as much, but again, I try and ride on the balls of my feet as much as I can. It might be the further you hang off, the more your foot ends up sticking out, but it's not the end of the world where that foot's placed whilst you're in the middle of the corner. And again, obviously when you're going right, the opposite applies. So you slide your bum off to the right, your inside elbow is bent, you pull your shoulder down, you look for the right hand mirror, and that's your body position complete. Tip number 2 is braking technique. So how do you brake? There's lots of different ways you can approach this. Everyone's different. If you look at the way Toprak brakes compared to Johnny Ray, everyone is slightly different. Now, the first thing is how many fingers do you put on the lever? There's lots of different ways you can do it. Lots of riders have different combinations. I've seen everything from 1 finger on the brake, 2, 3 and 4, to, I believe Cal Crutchlow leaves his first finger on the bar and brakes with these 3 or these 2. There's different ways you can do it. I always used to brake with 2 fingers. I felt like I got a good amount of leverage on the brake. I'd never liked having 4 fingers on the brake because I felt like I was letting go of the throttle and I wasn't in control of the throttle as much. It's personal preference, it's whatever you feel works best, but normally if you've got 1 finger on the brake, you can pull less brake pressure, and if your brakes aren't very good, you're going to struggle to pull a lot of pressure with that. You will see MotoGP riders using 1 brake and superbike riders, but it's normally for sort of fine control in the middle of the corner, trying to help the bike. So it's personal preference. What you might find is if you brake with 2 fingers and your brake lever is too far in towards the bar, as you pull it and you really want to give it some brake pressure, it might be that it then starts touching these 2 fingers. So always watch for where your brake lever is. Now, how do you brake? The way I go about it is at the end of the straight, I sit up, and as I sit up, I initially just touch the brake to begin with, and that first initial touch puts some weight on the front end of the motorcycle. If you don't do that, and you are flat out on the straight and you just grabbed a handful of brake without thinking about it at all, especially in the wet, you could potentially lock the front wheel. But that's really extreme. You're unlikely to do that in the dry. It's just something to think about. That first initial touch, if you saw this on a graph, the first amount of brake pressure would go up like this, and then you would reach your maximum brake pressure, and then it would trail off the whole way to the inside of the corner. So you sit up, you touch it initially, and then straight away, I'm trying to brake as hard as I possibly can, get as much speed scrubbed off with the front brake. Your back brake is something else, we'll come to that in a minute, but your front brake is where all your stopping power is. So you squeeze that, you're playing with trying to keep the back wheel on the floor so you can stop it as much as you can. And again, unless you're top rack, but I'm not top rack. So I'm playing with trying to keep the back wheel on the floor and slowing myself down as fast as I can. The thing you got to remember is as you're braking hard when you're upright, you're on the big part of the tyre, you lean over, you're going to have less and less ability to brake harder. So the more lean angle you've got, the more you've got to think about releasing the brake. So you do that first initial bit hard when you're upright, and as you turn in, you start releasing the brake. And really, in an ideal world, as you get to the apex, you should be completely off the brake and thinking about getting back on the throttle. All the way up to the apex, you're trying to slow yourself down, and then from the apex forwards, you're thinking about accelerating. So big bit of braking upright, 2, 3, 4 fingers, whatever you feel like works best for you. Brake as hard as you can, let go of the brake, and then as you're turning into the apex, you're letting the brake off more and more and more the whole way in until you're at the apex. Tip number 3, how do you back shift? Now, every bike's different these days because some have auto blippers, some don't. Some clutches are really good, some slipper clutches aren't, and the basics of it are pretty much the same, but you might have to do some fine tweaking for your own bike. So this bike has an auto blipper, so to back shift with an auto blipper, all you have to do is brake. You don't have to think about the clutch, you can just back shift and the bike will put it into gear for you. Now, if your bike doesn't have an auto blipper and you need to use the clutch, you may get away without blipping the throttle. Some bikes you might need to blip the throttle to help the bike match the engine revs to the rear wheel to help it go into gear easier. So if you do have to blip the throttle, the technique is as you pull the clutch in, you still hold on to the front brake and then just quickly blip the throttle, and that will help ease the bike into gear. You want to try and be quick with the clutch and gear changes because the later you're going to start braking, the faster you're going to have to do this. If you start playing about with the clutch, a lot of the time on modern bikes, you can confuse what the computer on the bike's trying to do. So I always try and just get rid of the clutch as quickly as I can and let the computer on the bike figure out what it should be doing with the engine revs. With my back shifting, I really try and do my first back shift as quick as I can, get the bike to begin slowing down, get the rear wheel on the floor, and then I always try and space my back shifts out. You'll see some riders back shift really fast all in one go. You'll see some riders do them one by one. I've always done them one by one, and that way I know exactly what gear I'm in. The more I space it out, the smoother it is. And normally, if you can feel your rear wheel juddering as you're going in a straight line when you're braking, it's normally because you've back shifted too early and the back wheel's hopping and skipping about on the floor. So if that's you, try and think about spacing your back shifts out and leaving them a little bit further into the corner before you select that last gear. Tip number 4, your head position. So one thing I sort of touched on before with your body position, which is the next tip, is your head position. So One thing you'll notice, MotoGP riders, they're the best in the world at this, is looking further ahead than you can ever imagine they would do. The way to think about this is if you're driving a car on the motorway, if you look just out the window at the floor and you're doing 70 miles an hour, the floor looks like it's going past at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But if you pick your head up and you look at the fields in front of you or far enough away, everything slows right down and you get a lot more time to sort of anticipate what's going on. It's the same when you're riding a motorbike on track. And what I try and do is, as I'm turning into the corner, if I'm braking, I'm looking at the apex, where I want to go. If I'm already heading towards the apex, I'm already trying to look at my exit point. So you'll see a rider, as they're turning into the corner, is turning their head more and more and more because they're already thinking about the next step. If you're braking and turning in and you're heading towards the apex, you're safe. You know that you're going to make the apex. You should already then be thinking about looking at the next point further ahead. If you're enjoying these tips, make sure you check out my ebook at tmac77.com, which will fully explain everything that I'm talking about here. On with the video. Tip number 5 is to look wherever you want the bike to go. The most important thing with this is looking where you want to go. We all know about target fixation and how many times you've been on track where you're looking at the wrong thing and you end up going there. You might be looking just off the track and suddenly you're on the grass. You might be looking at another rider and not wanting to run into them and you run into them. I've seen so many riders brake, look at the grass ahead rather than where they should be going, panic because they think they're not going to make the corner and run straight on. So the most important thing is just look exactly where you want to go, and I can guarantee your bike will go there. The more you try and force yourself with your head to look where you're going, you'll go. So that's probably, out of all these tips, my biggest tip. Tip number 6, how to open the throttle. Very important point and can easily go wrong if you're not careful and you don't understand what's happening. Again, an easy way to look at this is to imagine the throttle and your rear wheel and the connection between them. So as I've got maximum lean angle, that's where I start at 0% throttle. I'm at the apex, and then the first initial touch of the throttle is just a small one, and that initial first touch gets some weight to the back of the bike, helps the bike find a bit of grip, and then roughly speaking, the more you open the throttle, the more you need to start standing the bike up. If you imagine that right when you're at the side of the tyre, you should have 0% throttle, and then when you're in the middle on the biggest part of the tyre, you should have 100% throttle, and everything in between is pretty much quite a linear graph. So the more I pick the bike up, the more I open the throttle and keep going until I'm upright. When you're upright on a straight, the worst thing that is ever going to happen on a big bike or a 600 is that you will do a wheelie. You're not going to crash in a straight line if you open the throttle to 100%, as long as your tyres are warm and your tyre pressures are right. If you find yourself high-siding, it's because you've opened the throttle too hard or too much for the amount of lean angle you've got, and the bike broke traction, it starts spinning up, the rear wheel spins, and by the time you realise what's happening, you close the throttle, which gives the rear wheel grip, and it fires you up over the high side and over the top. That's the scary bit about bike racing, but the more you practice it, the more you begin to feel what the rear wheel's doing. You'll be able to feel it spinning and sliding, and then you can play with it then, and you can practice spinning, picking the bike up and standing it up when you're upright and driving forwards. Opening the throttle is a lot more easy to understand than using the front brake, because you get a lot more chance to react with the throttle. You get a lot more chance to save crashes. If you brake too hard going in, it's a lot harder to save a front end crash than it is a rear wheel one. If you're spinning the bike up, you'll get time to feel it and then gradually wind the throttle off and help yourself find a bit of traction. If you go in with a load of front brake and you turn in, if you do lock the front, it's quite likely that you'll just crash and you won't have a chance to save it. So it's easier to practice accelerating harder. It's one area I'd try and work on more earlier on in my career. But again, you need to be really careful. It's a slow process. Don't just go lashing the throttle on without knowing what you're doing first, and just build up slowly. As long as you build up slowly and you're gradual in the way you keep opening the throttle, nothing scary will ever happen. If you do a little bit, 1% more each lap, something will happen before you have a big moment. The biggest cause of crashes I see on track days is riders getting overtaken by other riders and then suddenly trying to go 5 seconds a lap faster, or doing something that's 5 seconds a lap faster than them. They make a big jump, they open the throttle way more, or they grab the front brake way more than they did the lap before, and that causes them to crash. If you just concentrate on what you're doing, build up gradually, you'll be absolutely fine. Tip number 7, corner exit. The important thing to think about on corner exits is using all of the track in a normal corner. The only exception for this is in chicanes where you might not use all of the track because you're trying to set up, you'll go through a left and you're trying to set up the right or vice versa, and you might not use all of the track before that corner. But on a normal corner, say a 90-degree left-hander, you'll get to the apex. As you're going through the apex, you're already looking for your exit, and as you're getting towards the exit, you want to look where you want to go. So you want to try and look quite far up the track and think about standing the bike up and driving the bike hard all the way to the edge of the track. The more you can stand it up, the quicker you can open the throttle, and it's a bit of a balancing act and a bit of practice and technique to get that, but the more you focus on your exits, the more you can stand it up and accelerate harder and drive forwards. Tip number 8, relax your grip. These throttles are so light, you can do it with one finger. There's no actual mechanical force behind this, unless you've got a big old classic bike or something. But because it's so light and easy, if you start with your grip round there, you can really relax this hand. It doesn't need to do anything physical. This is why a lot of riders get arm pump, because they're squeezing onto throttle for no reason whatsoever. Just relax your grip, slide it round, and then gradually just start winding it on, thinking about your corner exit and standing the bike up. Tip number 9 is holding the throttle at 100%. One classic mistake I see on track days is riders not holding the throttle to 100%. Almost everyone thinks they are, and then when you put some data analysis on a bike, they almost always aren't. So it's difficult to know that you're at 100% throttle when there's so much going on, but what a lot of riders tend to do is they don't start with their grip far enough round like this. And if you start with your grip here, you'll only ever get to 80% throttle and you might not actually be getting to 100%. So as you're going to the apex of the corner, you want to try and slide your hand this way around the grip. The more you can sort of slide it that way, it gives you more leverage on the throttle when you're coming out. It's something you can practice on the stand in the garage and just think about where your hand position is. Down the straight, on a 1000cc bike, you might find that your bike's going to want to wheelie and you're going to have to manage the throttle. It might not be possible to get the throttle to 100% the whole time. But on a 600 or lower bikes, it's definitely possible to get that to 100% throttle, get yourself tucked in, wedged in there, and just pull on the throttle. Make sure it is at 100%, because that's just free speed for nothing. When your throttle's floating about between 80 and 90, you're just losing time down the straight for no reason whatsoever. Tip number 10, and the most important one, breathe and relax. As daft as this sounds, it is such a common thing on track days for riders to hold their breath, and not just in track days. In my own racing career, I did this numerous times. Some riders aren't like this at all, but I was a rider that held my breath all the time. I speak to riders like Neil Hodgson, he was the same. You come across the line, it's qualifying, you've got one lap to make it happen, you're going down the straight, and the first thing you do is you go, and before you know it, you've held your breath for 2 corners without even realising it. You come out onto the straight and you start panting. Track day riders do this all the time. I can only imagine it's because we're doing something that your body thinks it shouldn't be doing. It's fast and it's dangerous, but the more you can relax, and the further I got into my career, the better I got at doing this, was just breathing. I used to start the race, come out the first corner and see clear track in front of me, and I'd just tell myself to breathe. Get loads of deep breaths in, helps you relax. The more relaxed you are on a motorbike, the faster you'll be. It's really that simple. But just think about it the next time you're riding. Ask yourself, are you breathing? Because a lot of the time riders aren't, especially in sections where Maggots, Beckett's, for instance, at Silverstone, or Craner curves, corners that lead one after the other. It's very easy to hold your breath for an extended period of time without realising, and that really will tire you out and cause you all sorts of problems. So make sure you're breathing and relaxing. I'm pretty sure I had 10 tips lined up, and I think I'm over my 10 tips. So here's my bonus tip. This is the rear brake. Now, your rear brake is on your foot. In superbikes, when I was racing, or superstock, I actually had my rear brake mounted on my handlebars, a thumb brake. The reason we do that in superbikes, especially in the UK, is the tracks cause you to wheelie so much. There's so many corners where, as you're accelerating out of the corner, the bike's trying to lift the front wheel. And sometimes when you're hung off the inside of the bike, it's hard to get yourself to the back brake to try and stop the wheelie. If you press the back brake as the bike's wheeling, it'll bring the front end back down and help you find grip, and you can go forwards again. When it's on your thumb, it's a lot easier to do that. Not everyone has that luxury. You'll see a lot of riders now, my brother's one of them, that has his rear brake mounted on his finger. So like a mountain bike, you'd have your rear brake on your left hand, it's the same on his super bike. So he has his clutch lever up and out the way. He only uses that on the start. Then once he lets go at the start, he's got auto blip, so he doesn't need his clutch again. And then he gets his finger on his finger brake here, like a scooter, and he can pull on that. So as the bike's wheeling, he can pull on that, and it's a lot easier than using your foot. That being said, a lot of riders still use the rear brake on the foot. You'll find a lot of riders have it on their foot and on their bar, or you might find they just have it on their foot. The other purpose of using your rear brake is not only just for wheeling, which is really common in superbikes and MotoGP, they're using the rear brake to help that, is going into the corner. And this is something quite advanced. I really wouldn't recommend it for most track day riders. You can do all of your stopping with your front brake and you don't need to worry about your rear brake. If you're used to using the rear brake on the road, it might be might just be habit that you use your rear brake on track. But really, if you focus on your front brake, there's much bigger discs on the front, you're stopping at the front of the bike, and that will slow you down the most. But the other reason you use your rear brake is to help pull the bike into the corner. So the way I would do this when I was racing is I'd brake hard with the front brake, I'd gradually touch the rear brake at the beginning, pull the whole bike down, the bike's stable and steady, I'm stopping as much as I can with the front brake, and then as I start going into the corner with the front brake, I have to start releasing it, because if I don't, I'm going to lose the front, because it's going to try and lock the front wheel as I'm going in. As I'm releasing the front brake, I could start using more rear brake, because I'm not going to lock the rear of the bike if I'm gentle with it. It will still keep slowing me down, and dragging your rear brake like that as you go into the corner helps pull the bike into the apex. But as I said, for most riders, you don't need to worry about this. It's just another thing to think about, and it will more than likely cost you time thinking about using your rear brake. It's like trying to pat your stomach and rub your head type scenario. There's more things going on that you don't need to worry about. But if you do want to use it and you see MotoGP riders using it and you're wondering what it is, it's to help pull the bike into the corner, get that last bit of slowing down done. And it's becoming more and more common in racing. When I first started racing, my dad told me not to use the rear brake, and what bad advice that was, because as I got 10 years into my career, suddenly everyone is using it everywhere, and I had to figure it out really far into my career, and I still question him about that now and wonder why he never told me. Thanks for watching that. If you enjoyed this video, I've got an ebook that fully explains all of the techniques that I mentioned in here. You can grab that on my website, tmac77.com, if you're interested. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. So you've been braking like that, you sat upright. It's all right, Dad.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. See you in a bit.